Hey there, and welcome back to Local Marketing Secrets. I'm your host, Danny Leibrandt, and today I'm with Bryan Eisenberg. If you don't know Bryan, he's the two-time New York Times best-selling author, the co-creator of the groundbreaking Persuasion architecture framework, and even coined the term conversion rate optimization. I'm not even kidding. I thought you were like a major player in conversion rate optimization. You shared with me privately before the show. You actually coined the term. You were like one of the first, really the first person to use the actual term conversion rate optimization along with other terms like bounce rate, which, SEOs like myself and other people regularly use in the industry, which is just incredible. Bryan is clearly a legend. And then after that, we've got, he's helped major brands like Google, Disney, Dell, HP, and Travelocity generate hundreds of millions in additional revenue, been named a top 10 user experience guru, and has hundreds of thousands of followers on social media with over 140,000 followers on LinkedIn alone. Today, we're diving into his persuasion architecture, the four pillars that let any business be like Amazon, and how AI and analytics are reshaping customer experience right now. Now, without further ado, Bryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. By the way, funny story with the conversion rate optimization. That wasn't like we coined the term, but only because we wanted to rank for something. Because
Hmm.
um, people used to search for conversion rate. Yes, it was currency conversion rate, but we ended up putting out so much content, we ended up dominating the term and obviously coined it for the industry. But when we first started, my brother and I, Jeffrey, we actually more referred to what we were doing online as digital salespeople. And
Hmm.
people just hate the term sales and
Yeah.
sale. Yes. So that didn't work very well early on. So we learned.
No, that is just crazy. So yeah, us dive into your background a little bit. You're literally a legend in digital marketing. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Just talk to me about your background, the past 30 years or so, kind of how you got into it, and what was really the start of that.
Well, I've always been online essentially my whole life. I mean, I started a bulletin board system, my own one in 1983 as a very young teen. And even then, I was hacking, the code to try to get people to go to different parts of the bulletin board system and stuff. So long time. Obviously, internet came along, mid 90s, 93, 94, 95. We're already starting to play with it with a couple of businesses that we were in and consulting. And my brother had just taken me out of social work school. So he was always a finance guy. I was a social work guy, but we both had a passion for understanding why people do the things they do. And that kind of bridged the gap because we had no relationship before that. And we looked at business models and we were looking at, okay, well, how do we go about, building a business around what we want to do? And, we started in the SEO world and, that's where people were kind of, talking about some kind of, changes to website and website development. So we played around that space for a while. And we just understood, look, you got to, publish some content, get well known, start speaking, um, you know, uh, build out a methodology, build software. And that is essentially the trajectory that we did. We published our first ebook, The Marketer's Common Sense Guide to E-Metrics, 2001. We made a lot of money on that. Leibrandt, who was the big analytics player at the time, licensed it, was giving it away as physical copies during their roadshow. So that was real interesting. And then we also published Persuasive Online Copywriting at that time as a physical book for the first time, because all of our friends were telling us, well, you need to have like a business card that people can hold. And this was I think it was a $2.50 business card, our first book that we self-published. So as we kept publishing, then we started getting invited to speak at conferences. We were publishing on some of the big online magazines, Clicksy, and we decided we are going to write our next book, and that was Call to Action. And we published it. We did a deal where if you bought 3 copies, we gave you one free. And we mailed them out to a bunch of people. But surprisingly, we mailed one to Seth Godin, who didn't have really a relationship with. And he decided to blog about us. And in a post titled, Don't Judge a Book by Its Cover. And he literally called our cover god awful.
Dang.
Yeah, but he said, drop everything you're doing and buy this book. and people did, and we became New York Times bestsellers, and that led to our next book, which was Waiting for Your Cat to Bark, and yeah, and we got to speak globally. We're consulting to all these great companies, and then we turned our consultancy and our methodologies and our processes all into software companies. So we took our agency public. We acquired a software company, and we were embedding all of our techniques into the software, and we grew that until the market crashed in 2008, and then been on our own, and we've been working on some new fun projects, a lot in the home services industries for the last few years.
Yeah, no, so awesome. And let's dive a little bit deeper into like the focus for conversion rate optimization. Why did you choose that? You told me a little bit before the show, but let's really get into it of why conversion rate optimization and what were you doing that other people weren't?
So it's interesting. So it's where I got my original Twitter nickname. So we were part of an incubator in New York City, in the very early days of the internet. And the owner of the incubator, very bright guy, and his assistant actually coined us, basically gave us that term, you guys grok.com, and that became the name of our newsletter. And they called me the Grok, because if you're familiar with A Stranger in a Strange Land, Grok means to understand at a deep cellular level, because we were really looking at these internet businesses and saying, look, you have no close. They didn't understand how to sell anything. They were putting up websites, but there was no fundamental psychology behind how people were buying. And that's all we were analyzing. And yeah, we were doing SEO stuff too, but we realized we could have a bigger impact by the psychological triggers that we were playing around with, and the flow and the UX kind of stuff that we were also doing on websites. Simple example, one of our first articles ever was an article about shopping carts, because back then, and we all take this for granted, you'd hit add to cart and it would throw you into the checkout and there was no way to go back. and so we said, that's literally like going into the supermarket, pulling something off the shelf, putting it into your shopping cart, and just staring at it, and then wondering what to do next. Like there was no clear direction. And so that encouraged people to start coding, return to shopping buttons back early on. So like little stuff like that. And we realized that with his advice, that we could have a bigger impact, because there was a lot of people talking about traffic, a lot of people talking about search engine marketing, but almost nobody talking about how to close the sale and conversions.
Yeah, awesome.
So
Something that we
right,
were
just a few years too early.
Yeah, yeah. So something we were talking about before the call is that even though things have majorly changed, which we're going to get into of like all the AI stuff and how Google is changing, but what we were talking about is that things actually, even though they have changed, maybe the layout or the platform has changed, they're still the same principles at its core of, how we're interacting with humans, how we're marketing. Can you talk on that of like, what are the core principles here regarding marketing? And
I mean, there are tons of them, but I'll give you one that, again, early on we harped on. And, I was at a search engine conference, this week, where the SEO has been, who was in front of the room, was sharing some of the research he had on, I think he's got access to over 20,000 Google Search Consoles, $43 million, like all kinds of crazy money he spent on all this research.
mm-hmm.
And one of the things he found out, which is one of the things we told people early on, is stop wasting a long time for people to download your website. Like, it's got to be quick. If it's not quick, they're going to leave. And of course, people have always pushed that limit, as, when I first started, it was dial-up. Actually, when I first started, it was 300 baud bulletin board, right, with the modem. Then you had dial-up. And we told people, it said you have to keep it under 8 seconds. Well, where does that 8 seconds come from? Well, it's the same thing in advertising. If you don't catch someone's attention in the first 8 seconds, they're gone. So we were like, we just saw it when we did usability tests, and we can see it. 8 seconds, site didn't load, they were gone. And today, high speed, people still think they can bloat the page. And what he's also finding is that if you want the AIs to be effective and Google to rank you, if that site takes too long to load, it's too much of a cost on them. They're not going to rank you as much. They're not going to index you as much.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's
human behavior.
Yeah, no, that's something any site can do, especially because people are used to social media. They're used to everything fast, immediate, quick. One click to buy on Amazon. Everyone's used to that immediate gratification, right?
Exactly. And so, I see people who love to bury things on a page, big videos and hero images. For the amount of space it takes up on screen and the amount of time that it takes someone to kind of go through, you've already started eroding that relationship.
Mm. Yeah, so talk to me a little bit about a landing page. You rank on Google, someone clicks on the page, like specifically because we know the top of the page is definitely the most important. What should we have at the top of the page?
Number one, it's you just got to have a really clear impact statement about how you benefit them and the value you bring. Like
Mm.
here's the problem with all communication today. Okay, it's so easy to produce content, right? When we first started, there was nothing. I mean, I was hand coding articles on grok.com because there was no WordPress. There was no, like, you had to do it hard coded HTML. There was no way. I built my first ESP. I used to watch the spool of emails going out because you couldn't just sign up for MailChimp, back in
Hmm.
the day, right? Didn't exist. Now we have AI that just spits out content, right? Whether it's videos and images and text. There's so much, and it's so much noise, and it's one of the reasons I wrote my latest book is we're so overwhelmed with this noise that the only thing that cuts through it is ultimate clarity. It's got to be razor sharp. I kind of have a rhino in the back there as well, and it's like, it has to make one point and really clear. And we're finding that the same thing with every landing page. It's got to make one point. Now you can have multiple, you can link to multiple pages. That's fine. But the page itself has to be thematic to one thing, make it clear, make it relevant to the person who's coming to you. And people come for different reasons, so you've got to understand that. And then you have to talk with impact today. Because if you talk in just corporate jargon and just language that they don't care about, they're gone.
Mm. So the copywriting is incredibly important. And
More so than
specifically
ever.
that, yeah,
Well,
and that.
I mean, great imagery is too, but you know, I'm sure you're seeing it too, right? You remember seeing the early thumbnails that were being generated, like, by AI. Now everybody's kind of doing the same. They're
Mhm.
not as effective anymore.
Yeah, no, definitely. There still needs to be that expert layer because I feel like AI just as a whole, at least in terms of copywriting and generating images, which will eventually be videos. It is videos now, but I feel like there's still some room to improve there. But it seems like it's kind of democratized the landscape where now the bar has been raised. So now
Correct.
you can't really be a beginner anymore because if you're a beginner, then you might as well get replaced by AI. But now it's the experts' time to take over because now everyone's using the AI tools. You need experts to do better than the AI tools.
Well, it's even more than that, right? And I love that you mentioned that it raised the bar because I said, the quality of content, the poorest level of content is better with AI than everyone else than it was previously. So that's
Hmm.
great. But here's the problem. If you understand how these models work, okay, they're trained on all these bodies of work, and it's a predictive engine about what word needs to go next. Great marketing is not predictable.
Mm.
So if this large body of context is just going to keep giving you predictable words, you're setting yourself up for failure to begin with.
Hmm.
You have to know
Interesting.
how to be remarkable.
Huh. Okay,
Never
so
thought of it
here.
that way.
Yeah, no, I know that kind of blew my mind. No, that was good. Something else I wanted to jump into, kind of adjacent. I was talking about this a little bit before, but about like the whole Amazon model. Amazon has completely transformed the market, and you literally published a book called "Be Like Amazon." So, can you talk a little bit about that, of like your four pillars and how any company, like even a home service company, can be like Amazon?
Yeah, it even goes further than the book. So it started off as an early article, and I had a friend of mine interview at Amazon, and their human services department sent her an email like welcoming her and all that, and talking about all their values and stuff like that. And they linked to my article on the four pillars.
Dang.
And I was like, okay, if Amazon is linking to it, I'm obviously explaining it with better clarity than they do. So I knew, okay, this is great. Obviously I nailed it. But then Jeffrey and I, with Roy Williams, the Wizard of Ads, we had this question. Said, okay, can we find you know, small, mom and pop businesses that essentially leverage the same principles, right, that Amazon does, and are they successful with them? Okay, and we can go into the four pillars, which is, obviously number one, being customer centric, really understanding what your customer needs and focused on them. And we'll have to talk a little bit more about what Jeff Bezos meant by customer centric, because most people think they are, but they actually aren't, but he is.
Hmm.
You have to have a culture of innovation. So if you're always thinking about your customers, you're always thinking about how to stay ahead of them, right? And how to do things better. Then you need a culture of agility. You've got to get stuff done, right? If you
Hmm.
can't act and do, great work and have great standard operating procedures and duplicate your stuff and scale, you're just not going to grow. And then ultimately, you have to look at what you're doing, saying, okay, did it work? Did it not work? Because you're going to get a lot of failure, but then you got to learn how to tweak it. And it's just a continuous cycle. And so one of my favorite examples of this is Ken Goodrich from Gettle.
Hmm.
If you've ever heard of Ken, right? He built $100 million
Yeah.
HVAC company. When you understand a little bit about his background with holding the flashlight for his dad, his dad influenced a lot of his beliefs, and we're gonna have to talk about the word beliefs a little bit more later. But it influenced his beliefs, and one of the things that Ken believed about air conditioners was that every screw that a technician touched needed to be super tight, because if there's extra vibrations in the system, it would cause damage to the system in the long term. Okay, great. You might understand that. I might understand that because we've been in home services for a while. But how does a typical customer understand whether the technician touched the screws or not?
Hmm.
So what did Ken do? He replaced every single screw in every single truck in every single air conditioner into a bright red, shiny screw.
Hmm.
What color are most air conditioner screws?
Just gray, black.
Yeah, chrome color. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Now, as a consumer, right? Because it only matters if it matters to the consumer. I can go look at the work that you're doing and I can see, oh, look at all those bright red screws. I know you touched every single one of those,
Dang, that's good.
right? And so not only did it impact the customers, because now they know that his values and he's showing it, it's totally customer centric. It's easy for them because now when they're looking at what they touched and didn't touch, they only have to look for what's not shiny and red, right? And then they can just keep optimizing from there. And that's the beauty of something so simple. Like you don't have to big, crazy experiments. What does you think a red screw cost? But it
Nothing. Yeah.
distinguished his company so much. Okay, like in pest control, could you imagine? If you had something that was lit up where you sprayed everywhere instead of the invisible spray, people might know. And it's, oh yeah, that's going to go away in an hour, but you can see where we sprayed. It's all bioluminescence or something like that. Again, it's that same kind of visual impact to the customer that I've really taken care of them, and that's what you get when you buy from Amazon. You feel like they've taken good care of you because everything about what they do and they built their brand on is about the customer values, right? We value selection, we value price, we value availability, and we value getting good service when we need it.
Hmm.
And
The
that's
the
what we
term that's coming to my head, the term that's coming to my head is going above and beyond. That most companies, okay, we set expectations, we match them, but with Amazon and with these other companies like Gettle, it's always doing more. So, hey, we're going to do the service, but we're also going to do this. Maybe we give you a goodie bag or we give you, dog treats, just a little bit something extra that ends up meaning much more to the customer.
Yeah, it's what I said earlier, right? If you're going to be predictable, you can't be remarkable,
Mm.
right? Do the boring stuff, and boring stuff is what AI will replace at some point, right? If you think about the manual stuff, but the
Hmm.
stuff that's the human touch, the stuff that really connects to people's hearts, double down on that, escalate on that, because that's what's going to make you grow to a whole nother level. I've got a fun story. He may or may not be happy that I share it, but my friend Dr. Matt Delgado is a local chiropractor here who've been helping him for the last number of years, and we've worked on building all kinds of special moments into his business because there are lots of chiropractors. Now, he's a different kind of chiropractor. He's neuro-based and all that. But it's still the experience, right? From when they walk into the office, how the office looks, to how quick they're seen, to little moments that just trigger things. So he will go ahead and give them a gift at some point. I don't want to give all the details because I don't want to give away all the secrets. But another one we just did is we created a break the scripts moment where, again, depending on certain circumstances and where the client may be at, he's actually created like fake prescription pads that will tell you, hey, this is good for one time out type of thing.
Hmm.
Go give it to your significant other and go chill out. Okay. I don't want to give all the details of how he's doing that. But again, it's like those are human to human moments. And again, when it's delivered, how it's delivered, that's the stuff that you can't scale. But when you implement it, that's what makes you remarkable as a business. So yeah, LifeSpring Cairo, and then same thing. When you go to the website, the language he is punchy. It's clarity and impact over and over and over again because you can't be boring today.
Hmm. Yeah,
Even if
well,
it's businesses.
yeah. No, I'm glad that you mentioned today because, all these like this has been working, really throughout the history of business. But talk more about how this is particularly so prevalent with all the AI stuff, with all the noise, with all the businesses. Like, why is this so important now?
I mean, there was a study several years ago. I'm trying to think about what is it, but maybe a decade ago, where the average person was touched by like 5,000 ads a day or something like that. Now it must be like 20 or 30,000,
Yeah, I
right?
can't even
Think about
imagine.
how much content, all the videos people scroll through on TikTok and Instagram, like there's just so much noise. And then from our business perspective, right, we're overwhelmed with the number of hours we're working, with traffic, with new AIs that are coming out every day, with new tools, with 16 different dashboards. Our brains, and he sees it as a nervous-based chiropractor, we're fried. We're fried. Our brains are fried. We're
Hmm.
overwhelmed. It's the reason I wrote I Think I Swallowed an Elephant, because when we left our agency and I was doing this with all these companies, I didn't realize how overwhelmed I was because I wasn't taking care of myself, and I ballooned up to 277 pounds. Okay. I legitimately thought I swallowed an elephant. Um, there are pictures of me online. A whole bunch of friends afterwards, they saw me lose the 100 pounds in about 10 months. And again, that had a real big impact on people because people said, hey, I need to take care of, my health. And now, I had just literally about a year ago, I had my health kind of sneak up on me. I ballooned up a little bit more, not quite to that level, but my blood sugar was 3 times the normal level. And I wasn't paying attention because I was too busy. I was still walking. I just checked the average, 9,400 steps a day. Okay, so minimum was 7,500, but I was averaging around 10,000 steps a day. I was eating plant based, trying to get as much work as I could with our startup, with my wife's home care agency. So, my kids, my family, my dog, like everything was just, life was lifing.
Hmm.
My brother had a couple of illnesses, so, that was causing stress. And I realized that my blood sugar had climbed up to 376, which is over 3 times the normal level. And at that moment, I realized, that cut through. Like, you don't want that. It's kind of like, when you're driving and the sirens go on behind you and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, there's that kind of moment. Like, you have to do something. Don't wait for those moments to get through to people in business and everything, right? So you have to find ways to pound your way through there with, like I said, clarity and impact. Within 4 months, I got my blood sugar leveled. All of a sudden, I had no more brain fog, no fatigue, blurry vision's gone, no more aches and pains. A bunion I had disappeared. My whole life changed, nonstop energy. And I wrote the first draft of I Think I Swallowed an Elephant in 10 days.
Wow. That's
Okay.
crazy. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, so I was mentioning I'm about halfway through your book. Absolutely love it. And you're talking about this concept the whole time. And I just like to dive a little bit deeper and maybe actually the, I guess, the after effect. So, you gain 100 pounds, or really this could apply to any life scenario. The business is failing, breakup, whatever you want to
We're
mention.
slugging through life. Yeah.
Yeah, talk to us about the transition of someone who's in a tough place, which a lot of people are. How do you make that transition?
You have to change the story. That's the first thing. When I made a decision to lose the 100 pounds, It was because my kids were young. My middle one had just like finished T-ball, or early years of Little League, and had another one, young one who was getting ready to start moving. And I was like, how am I going to keep up with my kids? And that became my motivating factor to really get in the best shape, probably since I was a teenager. So it was great, right? And the good news is I can still catch my son's 80 plus mile per hour fastball today. Much easier now that I don't have the blood sugar issues. Um, but that story worked until it stopped working. And like I said, I started creeping it back into the 240s, and the blood sugar went up. I stopped paying attention to it, and I realized. By the way, for months I knew the story wasn't working, and I was trying to say, well, what? I need a new story. I didn't know what to do. And when I just went for the annual blood test and got shocked because I couldn't imagine with my habits that I'd have blood sugar so bad, blood
Mm.
pressure through the roof. It just didn't make sense to me, and it woke me up. And I made the decision right there, and I told the nurse practitioner, I said, I need 3 weeks to just change things. And I came back in 3 weeks, and I cut my blood sugar in half. Then she gave me a continuous glucose monitor, and I still wear one every so often. This is one of the weeks I'm wearing it. And once I had the data to what was going on inside my body, I was then really able to optimize everything. And
Mm.
now my blood sugar hovers in, the 80s, 90s, like real comfortable levels. I don't get above any outside of the norm numbers. And the story was very simply, I didn't want to end up, you know, like my brother. He's got really sick in the last few years. I didn't want to live a lifetime of medication. I own a home care agency. I see what goes on with seniors. I see the dementia. I can't live that life. And so I was like, I need to empower myself. I know I can be disciplined and put the priorities into the actions I needed to take. And so I had to look at all my beliefs, which is the first thing I tell everybody to do, right? And that belief that walking 10,000 steps a day and eating plant-based and minimally processed food is enough to keep me healthy. It wasn't,
Mm.
right? So it limited me.
Yeah, no, that is so powerful, and that's something I noticed with pest control owners as well. I have some new partners that were taking equity in pest control companies and such, and one of my partners who he's worked with like over 500 pest control companies, he's one of
Mhm.
the most well-known guys in the space, and he said really the main problem with at least these smaller owners is beliefs that they are stuck in the technician mentality, that they are
Yep.
not ready to become the owner. They have basically just given themselves a glorified job. So that ties into beliefs too, right? Of like how can they
Oh,
switch that?
100%. So I feel blessed. I've had some amazing mentors in my life. Okay. Some of them turned out to be not the most honorable people, but they did share some smart things. And one of the early ones, this is when we first started our agency, way before that, we had a mentor that said very clearly he wanted to be temporarily motivated to be permanently lazy. Let me say that again. Temporarily motivated to be permanently lazy. And he said, you've got to learn to get other people's efforts. You need to create scale. So, of course, we've read Michael Gerber. Michael Gerber, was actually a former client of ours too, by the way. Funny story with the E-Myth. And everything I did in the early days of conversion, I documented my thinking, my processes, so that call to action was a whole bunch of things like, here's what you look at. When we wrote Always Be Testing, it was all the things that we would use to basically train our analyst on how to plan tests for website owners. Because I didn't want to keep doing it forever.
Yeah.
Right. So I understood the value of scale and standard operating procedures and yeah, and just having, just all of these ways to pass on knowledge, things like the Conversion Trinity, which we can talk about, a simple technique anybody can do to improve their conversion rates and not waste time with stupid tests.
Talk to me about that. What is the conversion trinity?
The Conversion Trinity looks at three things, okay? Relevance, and relevance is relative because it's relative to the perspective of the person who's coming on your website at that person, that one person who's coming. And there are different kinds of customers, and we can talk a little bit more about that. It's value, right? How do you express that value to them? And then it's action, which is how do you develop the confidence in them to want to take that next action? And so you can apply this when looking at any ad. You can apply this when looking at any landing page, at any website. Every page should answer those through questions. Who's this relevant for? Is it relevant for the customer I'm trying to talk to today? How am I expressing that value to them? Is it, clear and impactful? And lastly, have I closed all the loops so they're comfortable and have confidence to take action? If you don't do those three things, everything's lost.
Hmm. Can you give me an example of that, of maybe how you've done that for a company, or even just a makeup example?
Oh, I mean, we used to have it with. I showed an example on my webinar yesterday with one of my students who had a 111% increase in conversion for one of their people, Fit Deck. They used to have a playing card deck where you flip the cards and in an app, and it'd give you your workout, right? So it randomized the exercise. Great little concept. But they weren't converting that well. And so we did a few things. He started adding all the logos for all the different phones that it worked for. He changed the headline so that it really spoke more to what they were doing. Clarified the benefits a lot better. I mean, we can throw in a screenshot so that people can see it. But yeah, I do it all over the place. I mean, I did an example yesterday where I did a search for organic dog food, right? Because I was on a SEO charity where they're raising funds for sheltered dogs and cats in Ukraine. Okay, so I figured organic dog food's a great example. And I did a search on Google, found a sponsored ad, and you start asking yourself, okay, how is this relevant to the guy who's very methodical about taking care of his dog, right? Maybe he's an accountant or a cybersecurity guy or something. He's just super, super, methodical about everything he purchases. So when you tell him organic, like he wants to know the spices were used or organic, okay?
Yeah.
And you go ahead, you look at the ads and you look at the landing page, and it's like they're leaving him high and dry. Because here's the crazy thing, Danny, that I think almost everybody misses. In 2001, I believe it was, shop.org published the first ever benchmark conversion rates on the website. It was 1.8%. You know what a good conversion rate in direct marketing was? 2%. You know what the average conversion rate is today? 2%.
Still today?
Still today. Now think about it. Is technology better?
Yeah.
Graphics better?
Mm-hmm.
The way we access the internet, it's faster. People are smarter. We've got tons of books, tons of content about marketing, and the conversion rate's still hovering around 2 to 3% for most companies. And here's the crazy part, okay? In direct marketing, I send you something in the mail. Hopefully you open it up, right? You get a postcard, you call up 2% and you're golden, okay? Online, I searched for you. I typed in your name. I saw something on your social media and I decided to click through to your website. Tell me why in God's name it should only be 2% conversion.
That is horrible. That is so bad.
Why should it be 10%? What happened to the other 90% of people? Okay, maybe 50% have ticks in their fingers and they clicked it by accident. I don't know. So 50% gone. What are other excuses for not coming to your website? Why spend time going to your website and not buy? That should be the first question every business owner should be asking themselves.
Yeah. No, that is the low-hanging fruit. I talked about this. I did 15 hours of recording with my new partners for this new agency, and that's a big thing that we were talking about. And I was kind of even realizing it because, you kind of learn as you teach. And we were talking a lot about conversion rate optimization. I was like, this is the low-hanging fruit. You already have the traffic. Someone's coming in from Facebook. They're coming in from Google. Wherever they're coming in, they're already on the page. It's
your job not to piss them off.
Yeah. So you talked about page speed. What other key components are there then?
I mean, relevance is obviously the key. Obviously you talk a lot about SEO as well. Back in the very early days, I explained search engine marketing, SEO, all of that was all about 5 R's, and those 5 R's will never change. And it's funny, I had a good friend of mine, Dwayne Forrester, write an article a few weeks ago about this. about AI in search and looking at all this, and I said, okay, well, it's the same. It's the same 5 R's. First, is it relevant? Right? Is it relevant to the searcher? Okay. The only thing that the engines want to do is put you in front of relevant content for whatever query you're interested in. The only thing the algorithms on social media want to do is put things on that they believe your interests matched relevance. They don't want to do anything else. In fact, years ago, I had Ping Jen, the head of the quality score team for Microsoft, bring us in because he saw me speak about landing page relevance, and he wanted me to explain it to his team because I was explaining in more human terms, not geek talk. Okay. The second one is reputation. Okay, and reputation is twofold. Reputation not only is reviews, obviously at the local level, it's a really important thing, but also obviously citations, but more so, can you get media talking about you? Can you get your partners talking about you? So that tells a lot about your reputation, plus the behavior that the sites know about you as well, because obviously Google has analytics everywhere. They have the browsers, they have Chrome, they have Android. They know what's going on your website. They have Gmail. They know when people didn't purchase, when they get confirmation receipts. They know the reputation real well. And I'll tell you how we found out that. That's a whole other fun story offline. Remarkable. Okay. Again, if you want to stand out and you want to grow today, you just have to produce above and beyond. It's not 5 stars. How would you get everybody to give you a 6-star review? Okay. Because people expect the 5 stars today. Okay.
Huh.
So we really have to go above that. Then there's readability. Okay. And for the search engine, for the AIs, for the LLMs, how are they consuming your content? We talked about that earlier. When we first wrote Persuasive Online Copywriting in 2001, we talked about the importance of writing pages with headlines and subheadlines and interlinking with keywords in the links, and the way you write a link is with an imperative verb with implied value. Like, we talked about all this stuff, and guess what the search engines like today is those little short blurbs, FAQ type stuff that's real short, and so that's a headline with a subheadline and explaining it in one clear point. Like, it doesn't change. And then the last one is reach. How big of an audience are you speaking to? Okay. My friend Ray Bard, who's one of the most successful business publisher everywhere, whenever he'd look at content, he'd look at it on a 2x2 map, and he'd think about like an ocean, right? So you're reaching mass world, like pretty girls who are influencers tend to be kind of more ocean-like, right? Bayous, wells, and then puddles, right? That are very shallow and not very wide. So you kind of have to choose what market you're playing in, right? It's very different to compete in the heart of Austin or New York City than it is in Cedar Park, Austin, Texas. It's a suburb, but it's going to be a different market, right? You're not quite, the ocean size of Austin. You're going to be a little more, narrower and deeper because it's a suburb. You could talk specifically that suburb. It's kind of like what we've done with my home care agency. We're based in Round Rock, Texas, and so we've worked real hard to become the best of Round Rock because that gives my reputation a boost in Round Rock. It's not difficult.
Yeah. So really, you want to be the biggest fish, whether that's the biggest fish in the pond or the ocean or the lake or whatever you want to call it. So if you don't have much authority, if you're not a big figure, which by the way, this is exactly what I've done with my agency. I'm a young guy. I haven't been in digital marketing for too long, especially compared to someone like you or Dennis or whoever else. But the way that I can compete is by niching down on something like pest control and then being known for just not even pest control marketing, but one skill within pest control marketing.
Right. And not only that, but being remarkable and getting the results about it. So your clients are talking about it as well. Other people you're bringing on are talking about it as well. And so you're building a reputation, and you're building a reputation with the relationships that you have, because all the algorithms out there start understanding the nature of the relationship. So when you have me on your podcast, when you have Dennis on your podcast, he hangs around with these people who have authority in these topics. He must have some authority. You are who you hang around.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm doing here. I mean, it's for people, but it's also for the search engines. Maybe that's something we could even get into. That I feel like as I was starting to get into SEO, I'm optimizing for the search engines and trying to show up in Google, and now eventually it's ChatGPT and all these other places. But I've realized, and I think you'd probably agree, that the search engines want to show exactly what the people want to see, right? There's a clear correspondence that they're basically the same thing, that Google wants to show people that are authoritative and trustworthy and have a lot of information about themselves out there. And that's the same thing that people want, right?
So it's really funny. I'll bring up the story of how we found out how reputation matters so much, and it was more about offline data sources than it was online sources. I did a presentation called The Madmen of Search, that if you look for it on SlideShare, the slides are somehow whited out. Not by me. Anyway, we were working with a client who sold educational toys. Okay? And they were well optimized, like from a conversion point of view, from an SEO point of view, really well optimized. But they couldn't beat out, I think it was Hasbro or one of the big toy companies. Oh, Fisher Price. Fisher Price. That's what it was. And Fisher Price, you go to their website and they had the big flash thing going on. It was awful. Like, it was not optimized. They didn't have many backlinks. But this is back in the days when you still had Toys R Us and you still had all this. And people were buying their products more than everybody else. And I'm like, they've got to be using other sources of data, because there's credit card data, there's all kinds of other data that if I were trying to understand how to duplicate what's in the real world online, I would have tapped into, whether I admit it or not. And knowing all the sources of data that, for example, Google had, right? I realized that they had to be tapping into other things, because it wasn't what was on page. Because when people thought about educational toys, it was Fisher Price. It wasn't, educationaltoys.com, whatever their name was back in the day. And I think when you understand that, yeah, Google's only job, right, all the algorithms is just to give you what you want, okay, as fast as possible. And where it's going now with AI, right, search, it's only going to be quicker. So you have less and less time to do all of these things to stand out and build a reputation in your area. So, own that local, because that local can be valuable, and then bridge it from there.
Awesome. So I think you've probably gotten asked this a million times, but I'm almost just going to ask it for fun, and we can play off this. Is SEO finally dead? People have been saying it forever, but is it dead? Like, a lot of people are saying that now, but they kind of always been saying it.
So let's go back to this definition of the 5 R's. Are there platforms out there that people are accessing, or the search engines are accessing, that make it really difficult for the search engine to read all the deeper data they have? Yes, right. There's some technical limitations. I've got applications. There's data inside phone apps that it doesn't have access to. I mean, they just announced Instagram is going to open up to Google now, right? They didn't have all that Instagram data beforehand. So will there always be a side where there's some technical SEO that we need to do to work well within the LLMs, to show up properly for them, or for whatever the future of search exists? Yeah. TikTok is a search engine algorithm. Will the keyword research always matter? Will, writing and scripting and video and all that matter? It's going to evolve. The skill's going to change a little bit, but the core concept of what made search is truly the exact opposite of direct mail, right? Which is, yes, great marketing that's pulled towards you. And so we've got to start saying, well, that's really the direction that we're just going to head into in the future, no matter what. That's never going away.
And do you agree with the concept that it's moving from like keyword oriented to now kind of like topical authority, and that you have to be overall the authority in a subject matter or topic?
Yeah, well, it's also going from and I remember when, the average keyword search was 1 word, then it went to 2 words, then it went to 3 words, and now we're getting full sentences and chat, and now we're, people are, going in voice and asking queries that way. So that's changing. again, I'm going to bring it to the 5 R's. What's your reputation? Are you remarkable? That's your authority. Like, that's
Hmm.
it, right?
So focus on the five R's. That's just,
Focus
and
on
it's
the
a
five
timeless
R's.
principle.
They're never going to go away. And like I mentioned with LifeSpring Cairo, right? We went ahead and optimized a lot of his website, his social media, his office experiences, because they all play in this. And I used this example the other day because he had his uh, the head basketball coach for UT basketball in their Final Four tournament, and they sent him a text message saying they found the nervous system for the arena. So could you imagine you're a head coach about to play one of the biggest tournaments of your life, and you're messaging the chiropractor?
Huh?
I'm like, that's branding,
Hmm.
because they think everything nervous based is now him. They saw that at the
Yeah.
control center. Then that literally the same day or the next day, he's watching a video with some of these other athletes, and he had asked them some questions. They were playing some fun videos, and they were articulating the exact same language that we helped craft, what we call our brandable chunks, okay, in those videos. So everybody likes to talk about word of mouth marketing. Well, word of mouth marketing is when I can put our brandable chunks in your words, in
Hmm.
your mouth. When you can share the story of, let's say, I think I swallowed an elephant, the way you perceive it is way more valuable than all the other testimonials, because it's got to come from you. And it's one of the coolest things I've seen with this book, as opposed to any other book I've ever written, is that people take from it from where they are in their perspective and their journey in their life. And so the reviews are way different that I've seen than any other book. But that's the beauty of planting seeds of language, these brandable chunks that we call it. Um, those show up because those are the things that get stuck in your head, that when you search for it, the ones who use it most effectively are the ones who are always going to stand out.
Hmm. Can you give an example of that, of maybe like a local business who could apply that?
Um, yes, probably. I have to think about it. I'll give you another small business we used years ago. We were working with a joystick company. They did like industrial grade joystick simulators that plugged into your PC. And back then, everything was kind of flimsy, plastic, and all of that. And we helped them rewrite their copy that was very SEO optimized. We helped them write it to have more impact. And we changed the language to the first headline to "built like a friggin' tank."
Hmm.
Okay. And so uh, we had customers email stuff that, oh my God, this thing really is built like a friggin' tank, stuff like that. But a few weeks later, there was a mention in like PC Magazine or something like that that reviewed it and used the exact same phrase.
Hmm.
And so, if a high authority website like PC Magazine is now using that phrase, other people are looking joystick like a tank. Who's the only one who's going to show up?
Yeah, that one.
Right? Or here's another example. I was working with a new entrepreneur. He's been in a number of businesses. He's been working with founders to help them get their content out, and he developed a framework that he called the Organic AI Content Cascade.
Hmm.
Whatever that means. Like, I know what
Yeah.
all the words are, but it didn't make sense. And so I'm sitting with him, and we're at a coffee shop here locally, and I'm like, "Oh, Fernando, what you're really talking about is the viral genius framework." And he looked at me like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, every founder, every business owner has their own zone of genius. Every home care company, the reason they started and wanted to do their own is because they saw their own genius way of how to approach the industry. Okay.
Hmm.
And what he does is he helps them package that language through interviews and stuff like that and get that content out there so it has an opportunity to spread. So at first he was really cautious with me because he says, "Oh, I don't know about the viral part. Is that over promising?" He just posted yesterday a testimonial from one of his clients. They've gone viral several times and just keep growing. They went from like 500 views on Instagram to 6,000, to people asking him to be on podcasts, to recognizing him, to calling prospects, and they're actually answering the phone instead of ignoring them now. Only because we changed that one phrase. Because organic AI content cascade doesn't stick. viral genius with a logo that we made that looks like rated PG.
Mm.
So viral genius on the bottom, it says VG, which also has psychological layers of very good, right? It plays on the content part of movie, and people never forget it. And he's been speaking on stages now and getting a bunch of clients and obviously getting them viral.
Mm.
I mean, I sit with business owners all day long trying to help them here locally in the chamber come up with some of these nuggets, because it's just hard to stand out, right? If you're a fitness coach, how do you stand out from every other fitness coach out there, right? If you're a roofer, how do you stand out? It's hard.
I love that. So it's almost like a term or several terms that you can trademark, basically. That's almost how I'm thinking about it. That this
Yeah.
is like you have come up with the strategy or the framework or the architecture. And actually, this plays perfectly into my next question, which was, let's talk about your persuasion architecture. So that's something that you've coined or trademarked or whatever you want to call it. Talk to us about that. And that's one of the many brandable terms that you've come up with.
Yeah, it's actually we have a patent on it from years
Yeah.
ago. Um, it all started with kind of the same things. Three simple questions that we looked at. Okay, and we understood, and this is the whole premise of why the book actually got written. I think I saw an elephant because I realized, how do you eat an elephant?
One
One
bite
bite
at a
at a
time.
time, right? And it's a micro action, right? The big action is eating the whole elephant, but most of us try to think of our website as that big action. But every click, every time I have to read a paragraph is a micro decision. Do I keep scrolling or do I bounce? Do I click or do I go to another website? Okay. And so we understood the power of every little moment. And so we said, look, it's all based on three simple questions. Who do we need to take action? Relevance. What action do they want to take? Again, how do we build value for what they want to achieve? And then what can we do in order to, now I'm blanking out. What can we do to help them take that action, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
right? And with what action we want them to take. And so it's planning every single one of those little clicks that we built tools for and processes for, and that's what made sites rank better, because all the interlinking that we used to do, because if you had a question on a particular phrase and you didn't answer it the first time, we answer on the next one, and we would get conversion lifts of 500%, 1,000%, like just insane numbers, because they were just playing a different game than everybody else. um, and so we took that process, and unfortunately it took months to plan out for clients. It wasn't a simple process, because it was literally every click, and you had to define like what personas were going to be on this page and what was mattered to them, and that would go to the copywriter and they would start right. It took forever. And then we eventually, when we started working for Google, they loved the process, but they wanted something that was more agile, and we created buyer legends, which is our revised version of that, which you can do in as little as 90 minutes. Okay,
Talk
but
about that.
yeah. So it's the same process, right? We're just telling the story of who that customer is, really getting an understanding of who that persona is. There's a lot of details on how we do that. That's in multiple of our books. Um, but then we're planning what that journey looks like, what that narrative looks like, what the story is. Because the reality is every person who comes to you is living in their own story, right?
Mm.
I called the other day to have a tune-up on my garage door. Okay, it's just making a couple of noises. It's getting summertime here in Austin. I'm like, I might as well get it checked out. And they came and they left me some quotes. And it's a friend of mine's company. Of course, he said he'll take care of me when I'm ready to replace my door. But, they came with this quote. It's like, we can't really do the tune-up because it needs too much at this point. Like, when it dies, I'm going to replace the door. Like, that's where it is. Not worth spending money on, but it's that. But they didn't take the time as much as they could have to understand where I was and why I was calling.
Mm.
And I told them about it a little bit, but didn't hear it. And when you don't understand where the customer's story is coming from, you can't move them forward in any kind of momentum, right? That's when you start getting ignored.
Mm. Yeah. No, I had Brigham Dickinson on my podcast, I think a month or two ago. You might be familiar with him. He's one of the top guys who trains CSRs in the home service space. And one of the things he says is a big problem with picking up the phone, replying to leads, is that someone will say, "Hey, I need a garage door fix or my AC's broken or whatever," and they'll go,
Mhm.
"Okay, great. What's your address? We'll be over there." And that there's no like actual diving into the story, understanding
It-
them,
There's
understanding their
no
problems.
empathy. Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
empathy to start with. I was at Service Titan conference. I think it was last year, last or 2 years ago, and they talked about it. Right, they're monitoring all of these calls and they're listening to it. And it's like they know by the number of questions you spend, the likelihood of conversion. The more questions, the more likely they are to convert. And
Yeah.
everyone just wants to get to book, 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 book. That's why we got 2% conversion rates.
Yeah, no, 100%. One of the last things I wanted to cover here was you working with big companies like Google and Dell and Disney, which is just crazy. And, obviously most companies will never reach that level. But
Yeah.
I just want to like jump into that world for a second of, first off, what's it even like to work with companies at that scale? And, what are they doing that others are doing? And what are they still not doing right?
Well, there's a reason we no longer work with big companies because there's lots of frustration in working with them. Um, they just get much better at operations. Some of them have truly brilliant people. Google, again, had some amazingly brilliant people. And then you got companies like Universal Orlando, where when Al came to us, he had tried two other redesigns, couldn't increase the conversion rate. He was about to get fired if he didn't get a 10% conversion rate. And we walk in there and 75 feet of research about their customers, but not asking all the right questions.
Hmm.
And we just started changing the questions around, started doing some research with them, and got them not even a full implementation, and they still got an 80% lift in conversion rate. Because we started answering the right questions. And he couldn't get the full thing implemented because, again, the politics, the this, the that. But he got enough of it done and got the win. And then he wasn't ready to do more because he got his win and he was done.
Hmm.
Um, and we've seen this over and over again. We helped Overstock.com with the CEO of Patrick Byrne. We worked with him literally overnight, gave him a solution, made a change. We found out later on it accounted for a $25 million lift in sales from changing one graphic, and they never ever did another change after that. Or
Wow.
we worked with Dell, with my friend Sam before they left, and he wanted a report of all the things that they can do to improve the conversion rate on the website. And he's like, okay, the report was like 65 pages long. He said, okay, well, what do we do first? He came back with a spreadsheet. He helped us learn more about prioritization in big companies, which is a big thing. And we came up with one test that gave them tens of millions of dollars over and over again, year after year, until the B2B section finally took it over and did the same thing. Um, they never did anything else from that book.
Hmm.
So you can have big gains in big companies and then nothing else happens, or somebody changes position and everything else is just gone. So
Interesting.
we
You,
like
you,
working with decision makers and people who can just commit to, I'm the owner and you know I can make it happen.
yeah,
Because
definitely. You
it comes
said
back
you
to the
said they
four
weren't.
pillars, right?
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
execute?
Hmm. You said they're not asking the right questions. What are the right questions?
It depends on the industry. So, for example, with Universal, this is at the time, like now they talk a lot about Harry Potter World and all of that. But back then they were really pitching that, competing against Disney, that they had like a little Seuss World for the kids and stuff like that. And one of the things we found out is when we talked to people as they were coming to the doors, Dr. Seuss actually turned them off. Like when the kids were in the rides, it was fine, but it was turning them off. And to the point where our third party analyst who was doing the surveys for us, within the first question, he was able to know whether these people were going to be completely turned off or not. It was just so obvious how blatant of a problem it was. And so, just by helping them understand how complex the sale was, what things mattered to their customers, in what order it mattered to their customers, um, it changed everything. Or, we worked with WebEx in a day who thought they had 42 personas, different kinds of groups buying from them. We boiled it down. It was really six people who bought kind of the same way. We're able to simplify the content, simplify the messaging, increase conversions. People overcomplicate things a lot, and they suffer from a lot of curses of knowledge. They think their customers care about their product or their service as much as they do. The typical pest control owner, how many hours a day does he think about pest control?
A lot.
Okay. The typical customer, how many hours do they want to spend thinking about pest control in a year?
0.
You've got a problem there.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, talk to me more about that, of like that discrepancy. And we were even discussing this before the call, that you actually think the angle for pest control is like, hey, we're not even here. We're invisible. You don't want to worry about bugs. It's almost embarrassing to have a pest control truck in front of your house. Talk more about that, of like how that applies to pest control and other home services.
I would steal the campaign Got Milk. Got Milk was a great ad campaign that worked in the absence of milk.
Hmm.
Think about that. So I'm like, got bugs? You shouldn't. And you shouldn't have a pest control guy breaking the time of your day to come spray everywhere.
Hmm.
Like, you just don't want bugs. Great. We're going to be invisible. We're going to come. We're going to spray during the daytime. We're going to come a few times during the year. You're never going to notice us, but you're not going to see bugs. And if you've got bugs, it's our fault.
Hmm. So you have to get really clear on the messaging, and that comes from understanding your target market. I feel like a pretty big thing, you've probably seen this, that a lot of people are talking about offers now, like Alex Ramosi had his really famous book, $100 million offers. Everyone's talking about offers, but not so much the messaging around it. So I feel like you're really filling that gap of like, no, we still need everything around the offer as well, and how we're portraying that.
You got to start first with building value. So, my brother Jeffrey is now helping Elmer Zubiate, who sold Zubies, build a company called Zuby.com out in San Antonio. It's a new home services company. And they want to take care of like your monthly maintenance, your honey to-do lists. You probably don't have that right now. But, if you've got change the filters in the air conditioner, you've got to check the smoke detectors, you've got to, change light bulbs, that are 10 feet up. All these other things, you need to paint that bathroom that hasn't been painted in a long time. They want to offer all of these home maintenance things. So what they've started doing is actually putting out checklists of monthly maintenance things for people. So either they can do it themselves, or they can pay a low monthly fee and have somebody come in and they can enjoy their Saturday.
That's a good angle.
Yeah. So again, right? It's bringing value to the customer first by saying, "Hey, look, we know you have all these tasks to do. Like everyone else, you probably got an elephant on your shoulder. Right? There's my little elephant, like a big elephant, right? Big elephant sitting on your shoulder. You're overwhelmed. You're stressed out. By the time Saturday comes, you want to get it done, but you don't have really the time to do it. You get caught up with this, mowing the grass, let us come once a month, give you the peace of mind, and all of these things will be taken care of for you. Value up front. It's a much simpler offer because we're trying to say, hey, we know you got to do this well, and yeah, you probably feel bad you're not doing it, and your wife is probably complaining that you haven't gotten it done. Easy, we can take care of it for you.
Love that. Just simple, but still value oriented. You have these problems, we're solving the problems. It's just, I feel like that's kind of what I'm getting from this overall show, is like, your service should be fairly simple, and the way that you portray that should be simple. Like, stop, generating tons of blogs, stop generating tons of content, like get really clear on a great service, and then get really clear on the messaging of that service.
Correct. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Awesome. To close off here, Bryan, I'd like you to just give a final message to either local marketers or local business owners. Like, what do you want to leave the people off with? What do they need to know?
I think one of the biggest things, from this point in my life, I would say is, if you don't have clarity in your life, you're not going to have clarity in your messaging. You're not going to have clarity in your business. You're not going to have clarity in your relationships. And those things matter. And spend the time on you, because there's no sense in you being burnt out when everyone else around you is also being burnt out. And we see the amount of chronic disease out there and all these issues, lack of attention that everybody has. be the source that is paying attention, that is delivering attention to people, and people will be attracted to you.
Love that. So good. Well, this has been an awesome show, Bryan. I've learned so much from you. You know, the 5 R's, the kind of the 4 pillars. We have the 3 aspects of conversion. All of this so great. You are so amazing. You've been an awesome podcast guest, and it's been an absolute honor to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Danny. I really appreciate it. And you are doing remarkable things. You're standing out, and I love seeing the content you're putting out there and the impact that you're making on your community and on your clients, and just keep delivering.
Thank you, Bryan. I really appreciate that. And where can people find you, learn more about you, your services, all the stuff you're doing?
You could probably search for me anywhere and you'll find me. Lots and lots of content out there. But yeah, my website, bryaneisenberg.com, LinkedIn, Facebook. Yeah, I'm just about everywhere you can find me.
Awesome. And you've got 7 books, I believe. What's the first one?
11.
11. Oh, okay.
11.
I only saw 7. I guess there's even more than that. That's my bad as an interviewer. Yeah. Okay, so of your 11, what book should people read first of yours?
So several people who have interviewed this, who've read all my books, said, this is our greatest hits in one volume, made really simple and clear for the first time. So every chapter is 250 to 400 words, and there's lots of nuggets in there. So I Think I Swallowed an Elephant, The Stories We Sell, The Success We Build, just became available today as we're speaking on Audible. So you can get that. Be Like Amazon is also a fantastic book. And then if you've got young kids who you want to, get them interested in being an entrepreneur, have them read The Rice and Beans Millionaire.
Awesome. Love that. Okay, cool. So definitely go read I Think I Swallowed an Elephant. I'm about halfway through. I love it. Make sure to go follow him on LinkedIn, Twitter, all other platforms. All those links will be in the description. And thank you so much for coming on, Bryan. It's been awesome.
Absolutely, Danny. So thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.